Is Talion the Kindly Lord a CEDH commander? Find out on today's episode. Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into tonight's game, I wanted to ask a question. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out today's sponsor, Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. They have three main services. Their standard service lets you send them your unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the description below or use the promo code POWER, you will also get 10% off of their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ashani piloting Talion, the Kindly Lord. This deck seeks to control the table before winning with a Labman style effect. Ashani's opening hand contains a Mox Diamond, Watery Grave, Spell Pierce, Talisman of Dominance, Jeweled Lotus, Hullbreaker Horror, and a copy artifact. Next, we have Drake piloting Esika, God of the Tree. This is a storm deck that seeks to use its commander for mana and Jeskai Ascendancy for advantage. Drake's opening hand contains a Mana Vault, Mox Opal, Elvish Spirit Guide, Deflecting Swat, Sensei's Divining Top, City of Brass, and a Jataxian Probe. After that, we have our Mox Pro patron Brandon piloting Marwyn the Nurturer. This deck seeks to put a ton of counters on Marwyn, gain lots of mana, and storm off for the win. Brandon's opening hand contains a Chrome Mox, Umbral Mantle, Turntimber Symbiosis, Survival of the Fittest, Embiggen, Utopia Sprawl, and his Lena Mulligan is a Great Oak Guardian. Finally, we have our Mox Pro patron Peter piloting Kenrith, the Return King. This mid-range deck seeks to grind advantage with its commander before going for a Thassa's Oracle or Underworld Breachline. Peter's opening hand contains a Soul Ring, Soul Partition, Lotus Petal, Finale of Devastation, Mana Crypt, Mystic Remora, and a City of Traders. Without further ado, let's kick off this ostentatious ornate original organization. Brandon won the Face Wax Challenge and gets to start us off. Brandon draws a card for turn and plays a Turntimber Serpentine Wood into play tapped. He casts a Chrome Mox imprinting Utopia Sprawl. Brandon passes. Peter draws and plays a Tarnished Citadel. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts a Lotus Petal. He taps Tarnished Citadel to cast a Mystic Remora. Off to a great start, Peter passes the turn. Ashani draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. Remora triggers and Peter draws. He cracks Flooded Strand, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He cracks his Jeweled Lotus to help cast his commander, Talion the Kindly Lord. It enters and Ashani names 1. Ashani ends his turn. Drake draws and plays a City of Brass. He exiles Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a green. He casts a Mana Vault. Remora and Talion trigger, Drake loses 2 life, and Ashani draws, then Peter draws, then Mana Vault resolves. He casts Sensei's Divining Top. Drake loses 2 life, then Ashani and Peter draw again. Drake casts Mox Opal, and Peter draws through Remora. He taps a City of Brass to help cast Esika, God of the Tree. Talion triggers, Drake loses 2, and Ashani draws a card. Drake activates his Sensei's Divining Top, looking at the top 3 and rearranging. Drake ships the turn. Brandon draws and plays a Forest. He casts his commander, Marwyn the Nurturer. Talion triggers, Brandon loses 2, and Ashani draws a card. Brandon passes. During his upkeep, Peter wins his Mana Crypt roll. He also pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays a City of Brass. He taps City of Brass and Tarnished Citadel to cast Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy. He casts his commander, Kenrith, the Return King. Peter passes the turn. Ashani draws and casts a Soul Ring. Remora triggers and Peter draws. He casts a Talisman of Dominance and Peter draws again. He moves to combat and attacks Peter with Talion. Peter takes it and Ashani passes, discarding to hand size. During his draw step, Drake takes the damage through his Mana Vault. In his main phase, he plays a Bloodstained Mire. He moves to combat and attacks Ashani with Esika. Ashani takes it and Drake ends his turn. Brandon draws and starts off his turn by casting Embiggen, targeting Marwyn. Remora and Talion trigger, Brandon loses 2 life, then Ashani and Peter draw. Then Marwyn gets +4/+4. He casts a Woodland Bellower. It enters and Brandon fetches up a Quirion Ranger onto the battlefield. Marwyn triggers and gets a +1/+1 counter. Brandon activates Quirion Ranger, bouncing a Forest to his hand and untapping Marwyn. He plays a Forest for turn. He casts an Umbral Mantle. Remora triggers and Peter draws. In response, Drake activates his top, rearranging the top 3. He cracks Bloodstained Mire, pays a life, and fetches up a Plateau onto the battlefield. He activates top again, rearranging the top 3. Then Umbral Mantle resolves. Brandon activates Umbral Mantle, equipping it to Marwyn. He activates Umbral Mantle, untapping Marwyn, giving it +2/+2 until the end of turn. Brandon presents a loop of tapping Marwyn for mana and untapping her with Umbral Mantle. He makes more and more green mana until Marwyn's power is at 38. He casts Rishkar's Expertise, paying for Mystic Remora. In response, Drake taps his City of Brass to cast Thought Scour, targeting himself. Remora and Talion trigger, Drake loses 2, and then Ashani and Peter draw. Peter loves what he drew, so in response, Peter casts Mindbreak Trap, targeting Rishkar's expertise and Thought Scour. Then both are exiled. Brandon moves to combat and attacks Peter with Marwyn. Peter blocks with Kenrith, and Brandon ends his turn. At the end of Brandon's turn, Ashani pays 4 life to cast Dismember, targeting Kennen. In response, Peter exiles Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a green. He casts Worldly Tutor. Talion triggers, and Peter loses 2 when Ashani draws. Then Peter fetches up a Dockside Extortionist onto the top of his library. Then Kennen dies, and the turn moves to Peter. During his upkeep, Peter wins his Mana Crypt roll. He also pays to keep his Remora. He draws and plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts Dockside Extortionist. Talion triggers, Peter loses 2, and Ashani draws. In response, Drake activates his Sensei's Top, drawing a card and putting Top on top. Then Dockside enters, and Peter creates 7 treasures. He taps City of Brass to help cast Soul Partition. In response, Drake casts Deflecting Swat for its alternate cost, targeting Soul Partition. In response, Peter taps Tarnished Citadel to cast Flusterstorm with all copies targeting Deflecting Swat. Talion triggers, Peter loses 2, and Ashani draws. Then Flusterstorm counters SWAT, and Soul Partition exiles Dockside. Peter recasts Dockside from exile. Talion triggers, Peter loses 2, and Ashani draws a card. Dockside enters, and Peter creates 7 more treasures. He casts Witchclaw Talisman. He activates Witchclaw, fetching up a card into his hand and giving Witchclaw to Drake. He casts Finale of Devastation, where X equals 2. He fetches up a Thassa's Oracle onto the battlefield. Oracle enters, and with the trigger on the stack, Peter casts Tainted Pact. Peter exiles all but the last card of his library. Oracle's trigger resolves, and Peter wins the game. In this game, Ashani's opening hand contains a Shadow of Doubt, Thassa's Oracle, Cyclonic Rift, Underground Sea, Opposition Agent, Dark Ritual, and a Mana Crypt. Drake's opening hand contains a Banishing Knack, Mox Amber, Jeweled Lotus, Simian Spirit Guide, Vampiric Tutor, Savine's Reclamation, and a Misty Rainforest. Brandon's opening hand contains a Woodland Bellower, Garruk Primal Hunter, Invigorate, Wirewood Lodge, Soul Ring, and 2 Forests. Peter's opening hand contains a Mayhem Devil, Flusterstorm, Culling Ritual, Demonic Consultation, Marsh Flats, Mana Crypt, and a Noble Hierarch. And Ashani gets to start us off. Ashani draws a card for turn and plays an Underground Sea. He casts a Mana Crypt and passes. Drake draws and plays a Misty Rainforest. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He cracks it to cast his commander, Esika, God of the Tree. He cracks Misty Rainforest and pays a life. In response, Ashani flashes in an Opposition Agent. Agent resolves, and then Ashani fetches up an Underground Sea from Drake's library into exile. Drake casts a Mox Amber and ends his turn. Brandon draws and plays a Forest. He casts a Soul Ring and ships the turn to Peter. Peter draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He casts a Mana Crypt and passes to Ashani. During his upkeep, Ashani loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays an Underground Sea from exile. He casts his commander, Talion the Kindly Lord. Talion enters, and Ashani chooses 1. He moves to combat and attacks Peter with Opposition Agent. Peter takes it, and Ashani passes. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Peter with Esika. Peter takes it, and in his second main phase, Drake casts Serum Visions. Talion triggers, and Drake loses 2 life, and Ashani draws a card. Then Drake draws and scries 2. Drake ends his turn. Brandon draws and plays a Forest. He casts his commander, Marwyn the Nurturer. Talion triggers, Brandon loses 2, and Ashani draws. Brandon passes. During his upkeep, Peter wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws, takes no actions, and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Ashani wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and moves to combat. He attacks Drake with Talion and Opposition Agent. Drake takes it, and in his second main phase, Ashani plays a Misty Rainforest. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Watery Grave onto the battlefield untapped, paying 2 life. He casts Arcane Signet. He casts Mox Opal. Ashani passes to Drake. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Ashani with Esika. Ashani takes it, and in his second main phase, Drake casts Manamorphose. He adds 2 mana and draws a card. He casts Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. Drake ships the turn. Brandon draws and plays a Wirewood Lodge. He casts an Umbral Mantle. In response, Ashani casts an Offer You Can't Refuse. Mantle is countered, and Brandon creates 2 treasures. Next, Brandon casts Invigorate, targeting Marwyn. In response, Ashani casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting Marwyn. Marwyn bounces, Invigorate fizzles, and Brandon passes the turn. During his upkeep, Peter loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays a Hallowed Fountain into play untapped, paying 2 life. He passes. During his upkeep, Ashani loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He attacks Drake with Talion and Peter with Opposition Agent. They both take it, and Ashani passes the turn. Drake draws and moves to combat. He attacks Ashani with Esika and Lavinia. Ashani takes it, and in his second main phase, Drake casts Opt. Talion triggers, Drake loses 2, and Ashani draws. Then Drake scries 1 and draws a card. He exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand, adding a red. He casts Dockside Extortionist. Talion triggers, Drake loses 2, and Ashani draws a card. Dockside enters, and Drake creates 5 treasures. He casts Ranger Captain of Eos. Ranger Captain enters, and Drake declines to search. Drake ships the turn to Brandon. Brandon draws and plays a Forest. He recasts Marwyn. Talion triggers, Brandon loses 2 life, and Ashani draws. Brandon passes. During his upkeep, Peter loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws, still can't do anything, and passes, discarding to hand size. During its upkeep, Ashani wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and casts Mnemonic Betrayal. It resolves, and all opponents' graveyards are exiled. He plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts Serum Visions from exile. He draws and scries 2. He casts Dark Ritual, adding 3 black. He taps Ancient Tomb to cast Manamorphose from exile, adding 2 blue and drawing a card. He casts Op from exile. He scries 1 and draws another card. He casts Mayhem Devil from exile. He moves the combat and attacks Peter with Opposition Agent and Drake with Talion. They both take it, and Ashani passes, the cards are returned to graveyards, and Ashani discards the hand size. During its upkeep, Drake activates Ranger Captain of Eos, sacrificing it. Mayhem Devil triggers, dealing 1 to Dockside. Ashani bargains with Peter, saying that this is the turn where Drake attempts to win. If Peter can crack his fetch, he can kill Dockside before Drake goes off. So in response, Peter cracks his Marsh Flats and pays a life. Mayhem Devil triggers and deals 1 to Dockside. Then Ashani fetches up an Underground Sea into exile. With Ranger Captain's ability still in the stack, Ashani casts Shadow of Doubt. In response, Drake casts Vanishing Knack, targeting Esika. Talion triggers, Drake loses 2, and Ashani draws. Knack resolves, and with Shadow still on the stack, Drake taps Esika, targeting Opposition Agent through Banishing Knack. Agent is bounced, and with Shadow still on the stack, Drake casts Vampiric Tutor. Talion triggers, Drake loses 2, and Ashani draws. In response, Peter casts Flusterstorm, with all copies targeting Vampiric Tutor. Tutor is countered, then Shadow resolves, and Ashani draws, then Ranger Captain's ability resolves. Drake draws for turn and pays 2 life to cast Gitaxian Probe, targeting Ashani. Talion triggers, Drake loses 2, and Ashani draws a card. Then Drake looks at Ashani's hand and draws. Next, Drake cracks a treasure. Mayhem Devil triggers, killing Marwyn. He cracks 2 more treasures for mana. Mayhem Devil triggers twice, killing Lavinia. Drake casts Savine's Reclamation, targeting Dockside in his graveyard. Dockside enters the battlefield, and Drake creates 5 treasures. Drake cracks 2 treasures, and Mayhem Devil kills Dockside. Drake cracks 3 more treasures, and Mayhem Devil pings Esika 3 times. Drake flashes back Savine's Reclamation, targeting Dockside Extortionist. Dockside enters, Drake copies Savine's, returning Ranger Captain of Eos to the battlefield. Dockside triggers, and Drake creates 5 treasures. Finished up, Drake passes. Brandon draws and casts Kogla, the Titan Ape. It enters and fights Mayhem Devil, killing it. Brandon passes the turn. During his upkeep, Peter loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Ashani loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. Still in his upkeep, Ashani casts Limdol's Vault. He looks at the top 5, doesn't like what he sees, pays a life, and does it again. He does it 5 more times, paying 5 life. He then rearranges the top 5. He draws and plays a Cephalid Coliseum for turn. He casts a Laboratory Maniac. He taps Ancient Tomb to cast Sakashima the Imposter. It enters as a copy of Dockside, and Ashani creates 8 treasures. He casts Thassa's Oracle. It enters, and in response, Ashani casts Tainted Pact. He exiles all but the last 2 of his library. Oracle enters, and Ashani wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fun set of games tonight. Congrats to Peter and Ashani on their wins. In Game 1, each built up their resources, but had to stop Brandon from trying to win. Then Peter saw his window and was able to close it out. In Game 2, Ashani completely locked down the table with his Opposition Agent. The table was deadlocked and unable to really do anything due to this creature completely hosing everyone's ability to tutor. The most valuable card in tonight's games, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to Talion, the Kindly Lord. This card was drawing Ashani so many cards throughout these games. Due to the fact that it doesn't stop the casting of cards, people will still play into it, draining their life and giving its controller card after card. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.